If you think the same thoughts every single day, and for the most part, most people, 80% to 90% of their thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. And your biology, your neurocircuitry, your neurochemistry, your hormones, and even your gene expression is equal to how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And in other words, everything stays the same in the body if you stay the same. Well, it begs the question then, is it possible that new thoughts that lead to new choices, that lead to new behaviors, that create new experiences, that lead to new emotions and new feelings, that could inspire new thoughts, begin to change your biology? Would you begin to see significant changes in the brain as well as the body? And our research proves that when you change, everything changes around you. The second concept I want to talk about is the concept of coherence. And think about coherence as rhythm, or order, or synchronization. People who live by the hormones of stress on a daily basis, and for the most part, that's 70% of the time for most human beings. And when you're living in stress, you're living in survival. And when you're perceiving some threat in your external environment, when you perceive a danger, you have the perception of something that could get worse, it turns on that primitive nervous system called your fight or flight nervous system. And when you're in stress, you're always trying to control or predict an outcome. So people who live under the gun of those chemicals, those emergency chemicals, are shifting their attention very quickly from one person in their life to another person in their life, to something at some place at some time, to meetings, to places they have to go. And every single one of those elements that are known in their external environment are neurological networks that are reflected in their brain. So under the urgency and the arousal of the stress hormones, we begin to shift our attention from one person to one thing. We activate these individual circuits. And like a lightning storm in the clouds, the brain begins to fire out of order, very incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, you're incoherent. And when the brain isn't working right, you're not working right. And it's this state that begins to cause the brain to function like a house divided against itself. Different compartments of the brain no longer synchronize. And we've found the formula to teach people how to create more order and more coherence in their brain. And when they do this properly, without the aid of some type of drug, medication, or some type of external therapy, if they just practice that formula, they can begin to make their brain work better. When your brain is functioning right, you begin to see the world very differently. And so coherence then is when the brain starts to unify those different communities of neurons that were once subdivided. All of a sudden, you see the front of the brain start resonating and begin to oscillate with the back of the brain. You see the right side of the brain start synchronizing with the left side of the brain. And the brain is starting to function in a more holistic state. And what syncs in the brain links in the brain. And all of a sudden, you start feeling more whole. By the same means, when a person is living by the hormones of stress, there's only three things that primitive nervous system wants to do when you're living in survival: to run, to fight, or to hide. And because social mores say you can't fight, you can't run, or you can't hide, many times people are stepping on the gas because that emergency system is telling them to act. And yet they're in a business meeting, they're in the car with their children, they're on the phone with somebody, and it's those stress hormones that are beginning to activate the heart to race because blood needs to be pumped to the extremities in that state. But you're stepping on the gas, and at the same time you're stepping on the brake, and the heart starts to function incoherently. And when your heart functions incoherently, you stop trusting yourself. And all of a sudden then, the heart begins to send very, very inconsistent messages to the brain, and the person starts to move into dis-ease or imbalance. And so teaching people then how to create heart coherence and to create brain coherence and to synchronize coherence between their heart and their brain begins to make significant changes, not only in their health, but in their life.